And here we go. So this evening, we're starting a new series, which is kind of like a pre-Passover boot camp. So we're going to be having 3 classes this week and the next 2 Wednesdays, where we will be focusing on preparing for the holiday of Pesach. And just to put a framework of the schedule in reference to the calendar, we are 3 weeks away from the week of Passover. So Passover, the first Seder night, is in 3 weeks from this Friday evening. So the last class will be a week before Pesach, and the final Wednesday before Pesach, you will find me in my kitchen. So if you're looking for another class, you'll just have to come cook with me. And the focus of our classes for the next 3 weeks will be to explore the beauty, the meaning, and the practicality of the holiday of Pesach, so that we infuse both elements, both the practical observance of the holiday, whether you've been observing Passover for many years or just joining a Seder or doing your own thing, or if you're celebrating Passover for the first time, or whatever range on that scale you find yourself. Hi, Lily. You will be able to gain a deeper understanding and a deeper appreciation for the holiday, if it's something that you already experienced, as well as insight into practical how-tos. I'm going to share with you some of my hacks for making Passover easy and meaningful, because if you ask any Jewish woman who celebrates Passover, or barring those who go away as a guest for Passover, but anyone who celebrates Passover in their own home, they will tell you that Passover is one of the most difficult holidays to prepare for. And the truth is that the preparation for Passover requires a lot more work than any other holiday, because every holiday requires cooking and, preparing meals and things like that. But there is a whole new and different element to the holiday of Passover, which is cleaning and preparing the home for Passover. And unlike every party or event or holiday where you want to have a clean house, that's when you want to have it to be superficially clean, because if you have people coming over, you want it to be clean and nice and presentable. But this is an area where we focus on a deeper cleaning. And because the preparation for Passover is so physical and is so basic and like menial jobs, if you will, cleaning and sweeping and vacuuming and things like that, we sometimes forget that everything physical is paralleled in spirituality. And so a holiday that requires more physical preparation should also include more spiritual preparation, so that we approach the holiday and we're ready for the holiday of Passover in both mind, body, and of course, in soul as well. So that being said, I would like for us to be able to approach Passover with a feeling of excitement, with a feeling of joy, with a feeling of freedom. So we do not have to feel like slaves when we're cleaning our homes for Passover. But we also want to make sure that we're not behaving as slaves internally, spiritually, emotionally, so that we can actually approach Passover in a mind space of freedom. That we approach the holiday and we enter the holiday with the framework of not just I'm celebrating the fact that the Jews were freed from Egypt, but I'm celebrating my own personal freedom from my own personal Egypt. And so the 3 classes are going to follow somewhat of this framework. Tonight's class, we will be focusing on preparations and the activities leading up to the holiday of Passover. The second class, we will be focusing on the meaning of the actual holiday, the observance of the holiday of Passover in general, and lessons that we can learn that will enhance our holiday and help us take holiday into the next days of the year. And our third class will be specifically focused on the Seder, which is the Passover dinner, which has many steps. It is very specific and very beautiful and very meaningful. But because there are so many ideas, we want to make sure that we focus on core elements so that we can experience the Seder fully and appreciate everything that we are experiencing. So tonight, we're going to begin with, do you mind opening the door, please? Thank you. So tonight we're going to begin with what freedom means to each one of us. So give me a moment. If you can, grab a paper and a pencil, or just think about it in your mind. Hello, Erica, welcome. Think about it in your mind, jot it down on your phone somewhere. Please think of 3 words that come to mind when you think of the word freedom. 3 words that come to mind in relation to freedom. And of course, none of this is mandatory. You're welcome to think about it and or write it down if you're more the type that needs something a little bit more concrete. 3 words that you think of when you think of freedom. Does anybody want to share? All right, share with us, please.
Freedom. My 3 words were happiness, love, respect.
Happiness, love, and respect. Beautiful words. Anybody else want to share? Share. 2, okay. Power and elevation. Nice vocabulary class. Share with us. Unmute yourself, please.
Okay. I put down unfazed, self-assured, and unafraid.
Okay, beautiful words. I like that. What else do we have here?
Choice and self-determination.
Wow, okay. Lily, I see you unmuted yourself. What do you want to share with us?
I'm only thinking of one, independence. I'm thinking, that's all I do. I haven't
Okay.
got other than independence.
That's a good one. All of these words come to mind when we think of freedom. They all share a same theme, but they're each very specific and individual. None of them are wrong, though. And the reason that they're all so specific and individual is because freedom means something different to every person. And based on what freedom means to you is what will come to mind when you think of the word freedom. Because what you feel would make you free would be to be powerful. What you would think to make you free would be to be happy and respected, things like that, independent, or any other word that you thought of is what freedom feels like in your own experience. And yet, we're preparing for the holiday of Passover, which is the holiday of freedom. The holiday of Passover in the Torah is called Zman Cherutenu, which means literally in Hebrew, the time of our freedom. Cherut in Hebrew means freedom. The feeling of being unshackled, of being unchained, of being free from a previous burden or boundary or limitation. I think there's someone at the door. Can I ask you to get it, please? Thank you. And that feeling is something that we can all relate to on our own level, in our own experiences. No, just Lynn? Thank you. And as well, we can understand what freedom should mean to us when we fully understand the experience that the Jewish people had when they left Egypt. So we're going to travel now back in time. And we're going to imagine ourselves as the women in Egypt, the Jewish people that were living in Egypt. Now, it's very apropos that we can imagine that for ourselves, because our sages tell us that the souls of the women who left Egypt are reincarnated in the souls of the Jewish women of this generation. We know that our generation, we are the generation of Jews that will be the ones who experience the exodus from exile and will witness the coming of Mashiach. And that is something that we pray for every day. It's something that we say in our tefillot, in our prayers, and we feel the experience that the Jews had in Egypt and the feeling of freedom that they had when they left Egypt. So let's imagine the Jewish people leaving Egypt. When they were living in Egypt, they were suffering. Their life was not their own. Their choices were not up to them. They didn't have the ability to decide how to live. Many of their children were taken away from them. Their life was completely determined by other people's choices. And not only that, the people who were deciding the course of their lives were people who hated them, who tortured them, who made their lives miserable. The Egyptians, Pharaoh and the Egyptians, their whole goal was to weaken the power of the Jewish people. And so every bit of their lives, the Jews felt that they had no power. And then they experienced the revelation of God. When Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, came to Pharaoh and said to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." If there isn't a more quintessential Jewish phrase, it's "let my people go," right? And Pharaoh said no. And thus began the plagues. And the plagues were the time when the Jewish people were no longer slaves, but they were still in Egypt. And they witnessed that their oppressors, their masters, were now being weakened and made powerless by their God. And so, interestingly enough, the first steps of freedom that the Jews experienced happened while they were still in Egypt. Because now they had the autonomy to make their own choices. Now they had the ability to live their lives following their own path. I'm pausing for 1 second because I'm going to send the link to someone who just texted me. So bear with me a moment. There's coffee in the kitchen. You're welcome to make it. And then the Jews left Egypt. Now, what's interesting is that the transition from when the Jews were in Egypt, but no longer slaves, to when the Jews completely left Egypt was a very powerful transition. Because while they were in Egypt and they were no longer slaves, they were still living with a slavery mindset. Because they were still in the same environment, the same life that they had lived while slaves, it was only once they completely left Egypt that they experienced true freedom. And again, I don't just mean freedom that they're no longer being forced to work as slaves. I mean freedom as a state of mind. When the Jewish people left Egypt, that is when they themselves, their essence, became free. They were living as free people. And that is a power that only God was able to provide for them. Only God was able to make the Jewish people not just not behave as slaves, but not think as slaves any longer. But think about it for 1 second. If we look at the story, when they left Egypt, where did they go? They didn't just all now go on their own way independently and now live their life however they wanted. You're free, or go, do whatever you want, right? Like, that's it. Where did they go? They went into the desert. Now, when the Jews left Egypt, their goal was to get to Israel. That's where they needed to go. You would think that a nation that lived in a land they did not want to be in Egypt, for hundreds of years, you would think that they would take the fastest route to get to Israel. I mean, that would make only sense. And apparently their GPS was not working and Waze had not been invented yet because they took the longest route. They should have just logically gone through the Philistine land, which was a shortcut directly into Israel. But they didn't. Instead, they took the long roundabout route through the desert. Why? Well, that's because they were following God. Now, it would make sense, thank you. It would make sense that they're following God. God took them out of Egypt. But why didn't God want them going the fastest route? Why did they need to take this long roundabout wandering route? Hello, welcome. Come on inside. Cookies, marshmallows, chocolates. Make yourself comfortable. I told you it's delicious when we come in person. Yes, everything's fine. The idea of going through, this side's free, by the way. The idea of going through the desert, not taking the fastest route to Israel, was not a mistake. And it wasn't just because God didn't want them going through another enemy land, which was a consideration. One reason why is because, they're leaving the land of Egypt. They should not go through another land where there's a chance of war, a chance of loss of life, a chance of possible slavery at the hands of another nation. They needed to get to freedom without encountering any other enemy forces. But God could have protected them through the Palestine land. I mean, if we think about it, when God protected the Jews in the desert, they were surrounded by heavenly clouds, which protected them from the elements, which protected them from enemies, which protected them from wild animals. God could have sheltered them through this shortcut. And yet the Jews went through the desert. And they received the Torah in the desert, not in the land of Israel, but in the desert, because they needed this transitional period. They needed a time where, from being slaves in Egypt, they had to become God's people before experiencing independence, before coming into a land where they're on their own. And the reason is because freedom does not mean just having the choice to do whatever you want. Freedom does not mean having the independence to do whatever you please without any boundaries. Freedom means choosing which framework you want to live your life within. A healthy life, a healthy existence requires a framework, some sort of structure. Now, for everybody, that's different. For some people, it's a more structured framework. For some people, it's a much more fluid framework. But every person, in order to live a healthy life, needs some sort of framework. The term that we use for that is a value system. Every person needs a value system. Independence and free choice without proper values doesn't give a person true freedom. And when the Jews left Egypt, They didn't have the proper holy value system that would allow them to live their lives as Jewish people. They didn't have that. And so what was necessary for them was to leave the life of slavery in Egypt and choose to follow God in the desert, choose to accept the Torah, and choose to follow the guidelines of living a Jewish Torah observant lifestyle. And if you think about it, it's like, well, is that really free? Did they really experience freedom if they went from being Pharaoh's slaves to God's slaves? The answer to that is yes, because we aren't God's slaves. In Hebrew, the word eved has two meanings. And it's ironic because they seem so similar, and yet the meaning is so different. An eved in Hebrew means a slave and a servant. But there's such a big difference between a slave and a servant. A slave is a person who has no will of his own, who has no choice in his life, and who doesn't own his own existence. That was the Jewish people in Egypt. They were slaves. Being a servant is a person who chooses to work for his master because he values his master, or he values his job, or he values his income, whatever his value is. The servant finds value in serving the master, and his choice is completely his own. And when he is working, he owns his life, he owns his value, and he chooses to live his life for his higher purpose, for his master. The Jewish people went from being an eved in Egypt, a slave, to an eved Hashem, a servant. And that requires a huge shift in perspective. That is what we are celebrating on Passover. We're celebrating the mind shift that the Jewish people experienced from becoming slaves in Egypt to becoming servants of God. So what does that have to do with us? We're preparing for Passover, and we have 3.5 weeks until we sit down at the Seder, and we say the words, "We are free." We say the words in the Seder that we are free people. We're celebrating freedom, right? Isn't that what Passover is all about? So it's not just because you finally finished cleaning. Because like I said before, preparing for Passover should not turn you into a slave. If it is, well, stay tuned. I'm going to give you some cleaning hacks. And the cleaning hacks are coming from the woman who hates cleaning. So believe me, yeah. But we don't just want to prepare our homes. We want to prepare ourselves so that when we sit down at the Seder, it's not just that we feel freedom that happened many years ago, that we're celebrating a historical event, but that we're celebrating our own personal freedom. And in order for us to really experience freedom, we first have to know, what are we a slave to? Which entity in our lives is our Pharaoh? What in our lives is holding us hostage, making us feel like we do not have power over ourselves? We all have something. We all have that thing that we are a slave to. For some of us, it might be our jobs. For some of us, it might be an individual in our lives, maybe a toxic relationship. For most of us, it's probably this: our phones, our addictions, our tendencies that we can't control. For some of us, it might be our stress that owns and controls us, or our anger that owns and controls us, or even our laziness that owns and controls us. We all have something that owns us and that takes over our lives. And the only way we don't have that is if we actively get rid of it. So if you're thinking to yourself, there's really nothing that makes me feel powerless, I applaud you, because it must have taken tremendous amounts of work to release yourself from those shackles. Now, this isn't a therapy session, so we're not going to sit and discuss all of our concerns.
We'll be here until it's Passover.
No, but we can each think of that for ourselves. And what's interesting is that the way we prepare our homes for Passover it mirrors exactly the way we prepare ourselves to experience freedom as well. So while we're discussing the next idea, I want you to think about that thing that's your Pharaoh. Think about it. Keep it in the back of your mind. That thing that's your Pharaoh, that controls you. And it could be more than one. It could be something that's not a king Pharaoh, but maybe just a little prince Pharaoh, whatever it is. Something that makes us feel powerless, that we feel like we are a slave to it. And now let's shift to how do we prepare our homes for Passover? We'll get back to that, so keep it in mind. Passover is a time when, practically speaking, in order to properly observe the holiday of Passover, we are not allowed to see, own, or eat any chametz. Now, what constitutes chametz? Chametz is any food or anything that comes in contact with food that is comprised of ingredients that contain any form of grain that has become leavened, which in basic terms, that's any bread or cakes or crackers or anything like that, or any grain mixed with a liquid that has had a chance to rise more than any amount of time. Matzah is the food that is allowed to be eaten on Passover that is made with grain and liquid. It's made completely with just flour and water. And the idea of baking the matzah is that it's made so quickly that from the beginning, from when the flour and water touch each other until it comes out of the oven, is no longer than 18 minutes, so that there is no chance for the dough to rise at all. And the reason why we have the mitzvah of eating matzah on Passover and we do not eat anything that rises is because when the Jews left Egypt, their dough did not have a chance to rise because they left Egypt in such a haste. And I say this often, but it bears repeating. They should have taken chocolate cake with them. Then we would have 8 days of eating chocolate cake. But instead, they took matzah with them. So we get 8 days of matzah. But we don't eat any chametz. And the process of preparing our homes for Passover is to clean our homes completely so that no chametz is found in our homes, so that we do not see any chametz, we do not own any chametz, and then during the holiday of Passover, we are very careful not to eat any chametz, which means that we only eat kosher for Passover products. So we're preparing our homes, we're cleaning our homes. And that requires us not just to clean the visible surfaces, because visible surfaces we clean all the time. I mean, we clear our counters, we mop the floors, we clear the surface, we wash the outside of the fridge every so often. That's not a Passover job. And when I say we, I generously include our amazing cleaning help. May everybody who needs one be blessed with one. And the feelings of having a clean home are not just something we want to have during Passover. But during our preparations for Pesach, we go deeper. And we need to clean in places that we don't see on the surface. We need to look deeper. We need to open up our drawers and check to see if there are any candy bars hiding between the shirts. We need to open the cabinets and make sure there are no shampoos or soaps that contain chametz, which, by the way, if anybody uses anything with the company Avino that has oats in it, that is chametz. So we take a deeper look to see what's inside and we clean it out. And that mirrors the preparation that we need to do for ourselves as well. Because an emotional cleaning is something we need to do more often than just before Passover. Self-care, making sure that we're okay, trying to correct our flaws. Those are things we should be doing all the time. And we do. We apologize for our mistakes and we take care of ourselves and we make sure that we're doing the best we can emotionally, physically, spiritually. Often we do that. But preparing for Passover requires us to take a look and see what's on the inside and find our inner chametz. Our inner chametz means the parts inside of us that had a chance to grow. What do I mean by that? Flour and water, you mix it together, you don't get chametz until it has had time to sit untouched and grow. Anyone who's ever made challah or babka or anything like that, you know that if you want to have a good, delicious dough, you got to let it rise and you can't keep touching it. Now that's something that is a positive if we're trying to create chametz, which is good the rest of the year. But when it comes to Pesach, we need to look for the inner struggles that are often ignored, because that's when they have a chance to grow and become chametz. And often those are the same things that are holding us hostage and making us slaves. Phone addiction that is left unchecked keeps growing. That is a form of slavery. A work ethic that has changed from being a good work ethic into being a overly workaholic mentality, that often happens when we are not noticing. That could make us a slave. If it's this desire to chase after money that is not balanced with living a happy life, that often grows because we aren't noticing. That can make us a slave. If it's an anger problem that one has, a temper that is, the fuse is blowing too often, that's because we aren't taking care of it. It's becoming chametz. It's having a chance to grow. Those are areas that when we look inside ourselves and we start cleaning it out, that's when we become really free. Because the first step of freedom is not getting rid of your problems. It's realizing what your problems are. It's realizing where our struggles are. Which elements of my life am I a slave to? Where in my life do I need to find more freedom? Where in my life do I need to find more ways to experience free, joyous exhilaration? Where in my life am I lacking that element? And then, once we've started the cleaning process in our homes and in our souls, then we can reflect on the journey and the transitions that the Jewish people took in order to become free and parallel that in our own lives. So again, what did the Jewish people do when they became free? They served God. They formed a new life where their values were a reflection of God's will, but it came from a place of choice, not from force, but from choosing to serve God, choosing to live according to the values that they were framing their life with. And that is the way we as well can become free from those elements of our lives that trap us. So we need values, and we need to replace our challenges with freedom by channeling those ideas into a value system. So for something as simple as being on one's phone too often. I haven't met anybody who's not on their phone too often. I'll be the first to admit it. But I've been thinking about it recently a lot. And it's really hard. Someone who uses their smartphone all the time, it's really hard to not be on their phone. And it becomes like a power that's over you. Like you need to check if you're having any notifications or what's happening in the world, like as if the world's not going to go on if you're not witnessing it as it happens on Twitter, right? So we have this need and it starts owning our time. That makes us a slave. But just to stop and say, okay, I'm not doing it anymore, that's not freedom. It requires a value. So for myself, and I can only share my own personal experiences, and anybody else is free to share their own as well. For me, the value was, I want to be available for my children, and I don't want that I should feel like I have to be on my phone. And that shaped a core value for me, that I want my children to have my attention, and I don't want to share my attention with my phone. I want to be able to focus on my children. And so when I come home from work and I walk through the door with my children because I work in school and I pick them up straight from school. So I come home from work with my kids. I don't take my phone out of my bag. It just stays in my bag. And that's it. And until my son needs to use my phone for his homework, because no one in my house has personal devices, so he uses my phone when he has to do one element of his homework, he takes it out of my bag. And he always knows where to find it because I don't take it out of my bag. And if there's a reason for me to take it out of my bag before, telling myself, don't be on your phone is hard. But telling myself, I'm focusing on my children makes it so much easier because I replaced that slavery with a value that is important to me. And that creates a framework for freedom. Now you could look at it and say, well, now I'm a slave to my children. Sometimes, only at bedtime, but right? What does that mean? It means that I've created a framework where now my freedom is that I chose the value. That is how we replace slavery with choice and freedom with our own values. And that could be somebody who struggles with anger and their temper controls them. Telling oneself, don't be angry is really hard, especially when you're feeling angry and it's getting to you or whatever it is. But replacing that with a feeling or a value of, I want to have a calm home. I want to have a calm relationship. That is a reminder that we can tell ourselves, and then we become free to lose our anger because we know what our goal is. Or if it's someone who's at work and is spending too much time of their work, telling yourself work less is really hard. But telling ourselves not work less, but welcome, not work less, but what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to spend more time with friends? Do I want to spend more time in nature? Telling myself that it is important for me to spend time in nature, or it's important for me to spend time with my friends, that creates the framework for leaving that slavery. And that is what the Jewish people transitioned into. From the slavery of Egypt became the value of, we want to live a godly life. And this is what allowed the Jews to no longer be slaves. Now, something very powerful happened when the Jews left Egypt. They didn't just become free. They also became eternally free. What do I mean by that? The Egyptians were not the only ones who oppressed the Jews. Think back to history, recent history, more ancient history. There are many, many nations that tried to oppress the Jews and succeeded in oppressing and making the Jewish people's lives tragically miserable. But after Egypt, no one managed to make us slaves. They might have tortured us. They might have killed us. They might have made us leave our own home. But never again did we become slaves. And the reason why the Jewish people were no longer able to be slaves was because we became God's servants. You can't own someone who's already working for someone else. You cannot own someone who has another owner. God became our owners. God became our master. That wasn't an act of slavery, of enslavement. It was an act of empowerment. The fact that God made us his nation gave us the freedom that we can never be somebody else's nation, because God now owns us. And so this brings us back to the idea of how can we be free? If we are owned by God, if our soul controls our actions, then our temptations lose the ability to control our actions. We all need a master. Every happy, productive person needs a master. And I don't mean another person. But we need something that we answer to. And our values need to be our master. Because if our values and our goals and our priorities are not what own us, then our temptations and our evil inclination are what take over. And being free is choosing who and what owns our choices. That is true freedom. And when we clean our homes, and when we clean our chametz away, we can do that on the inside as well. That being said, please do not spend your time washing your ceiling. Please don't spend your time organizing your closets. Please don't spend your time going through crevices that have not been touched. That's not the idea of Passover cleaning. Passover cleaning is now practically cleaning for Passover. You clean anywhere that chametz may have entered. So if there's a jacket that you wear and you're prone to keeping cookies in your jacket, shake out the pockets of your jacket. If it's a jacket that you have not worn because COVID, you haven't traveled, you've never been to anywhere cold, and it's a coat, don't bother with it. You're good. And don't stress about the corners and the dust mites and things like that, unless, it really has to be cleaned. But Passover cleaning is not spring cleaning. Spring cleaning, unless you're the type of person who relaxes during organizing, if that is the case, I'm sorry, we have no reason to converse. I don't know how to relate to that, but I value you and I respect you and I support you through that. I can't relate to it, but cleaning for Passover should be something joyful. It also, for a lot of people, is not a joyful experience. That is what I mean by being free. Choose to make it a joyful experience. Put on upbeat music and dance with your broom. Put on an inspiring podcast and listen to something uplifting that makes you feel like you're using your time well. Watch this Torah class. If you're watching the recording, you're doing well. Whatever it is that makes you feel happy, that makes you feel joyful, that makes you feel free, infuse your holiday cleaning with your joy. Make it something happy, because then the same exact job doesn't feel like slavery. It feels like a purposeful experience. And that's our choice. The beauty of being free is that we choose if we want to be slaves or not. And that is something that we can decide for ourselves. Now, Passover is going to come whether we're ready or not. That's the reality of days that pass. And God willing, we will be ready physically. Our homes will be cleaned for Passover. Our tables will be decked with Passover delicious goodies and shmura matzah. And just saying that if you need shmura matzah, let me know. We distribute quite a bit of shmura matzah. And if you do not have a place yet for a Seder, consider that my house, your Seder. You will be there. And definitely. And when the table is decked with all of the Passover finest, and by that, I definitely mean disposable, because you don't have to clean all the Passover dishes. And yes, beautiful disposable. I proudly support the environment in many other ways, but disposable goods saves my life. That is my freedom choice. And the person who was sitting at that table, we, each one of us, should feel equally ready and clean and pure and excited for the holiday as your gleaming table, as your gleaming floors, which, by the way, they have to be cleaned. You don't have to do surgery on your floor, okay? And that's the same for everything. Your home should be clean of chametz. But my mother used to say this, I've heard this many times over, that dust is not chametz, and your family is not the Passover sacrifice. So don't slaughter them in the process. That's an important one. And you're not the slave. You're not the slave. So make it a joyful experience. Now, that being said, going back to what I said at the beginning about on Passover, you are not allowed to see, own, or eat chametz. That includes anything that comes in contact with chametz as well. So anything that you use to cook food throughout the year, all of your dishes, your pots, everything like that is also chametz. Your countertops, your oven, your stove, it is all chametz, and it has to become kosher for Passover. Now, dishes cannot become kosher for Passover, utensils, things like that, they cannot be used on Passover. So in most cases, I highly recommend buying a separate set if you are cooking for Passover, or get an invitation to somebody who's already cooking. And your home has to be ready. But your kitchen, there are many elements of your kitchen that you cannot use on Passover. So you won't be using them, you won't be eating them. They should be covered so that you cannot see them. So cabinets are closed, countertops are covered, a non-kosher for Passover, meaning, kosher for the rest of the year, oven or stove should be covered. And then you can't see it, but you also cannot own it, which is why we have the important mitzvah of selling our chametz. Now, the idea is that if you sell your things, they're not yours. And this is a legal transaction that takes place through the rabbi. And there is a very easy form to fill out for that, where you basically give the rabbi the authority to sell your chametz on your behalf so that it does not belong to you. And in that manner, you are not owning any chametz on Passover. So it stays in your own home, but you close it up, tape it down, and you say kosher for, not kosher for Passover, or chametz, or not for Passover use, or whatever it is, something that you know you will not be using it on Passover. And in that manner, you are fulfilling the mitzvah. So here's my hack. If you have cabinets that you don't want to clean, there's a chance there might be chametz in those cabinets, and you just don't want to clean it. Or your office, if you're not planning to go into work, close it, sell it, and be done with it. I can tell you that there are drawers in my room that I know I'm not going to use. In fact, I sometimes just take out the clothing that I need if I know that I'm not going to have time for it. And I clean one section, put all the clothing that I'm going to need for Passover in that section, tape everything up, and I sell it. If you are not using it on Passover, you do not have to clean it. If you would like to, you're welcome to. But if you're not using it, don't have to clean it. You close it and you sell it. Obviously, this does not include your furniture in your house, because that obviously has to be cleaned because you're using it. You see it, it's there. But in the nooks and crannies, you do not have to go. That being said, in your own heart and your own soul, check out those little corners. There where you have chametz, the spiritual work, do more spiritual cleaning than physical cleaning. Because the holiday of Passover is 8 days long. You can manage, by the way, the amount that we prepare for Passover. It's only for 8 days. But when we focus on the spiritual preparation, that lasts so much longer than the 8 days of Passover. We want to be free, not just on Passover. And in order for our freedom to be sustainable long term, we really have to clean it well. So now that we understand what the holiday of Passover entails and the preparation leading up to it from a spiritual and emotional perspective, we can use this time before the holiday to take steps to do it as a process and formalize that transition in our lives, so that we approach the Seder and we come to Pesach and we are free people. So again, we do that by looking inside, seeing what we are a slave to, and then transitioning that into a sense of freedom by formalizing a value that is important to us and a framework of where we want to be, what our goal is, and then starting to transition from the slavery to the value that we want to serve in a step-by-step process. That is sustainable, productive, and practical freedom. Being free feels good, but we don't just want to become free. We want to stay free. We want to feel free. And that's what Pesach truly represents. And that's what preparing for Pesach truly represents. So on that note, I'm going to wish everybody happy cleaning. And I mean spiritual cleaning. Your homes, you don't have to start cleaning yet. And everyone works on their own schedule. So if I can give you a practical tip, if you're preparing your home for Pesach, work backwards. I'm going to show you my calendar.
Please.
You could, if you, hold on one second. Also, if you're the type that you don't eat in the rooms other than in your kitchen, feel free to clean out. You're done with it. So this is my calendar. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see on Zoom, but I'm very organized with color coding, like only in my phone. In real life, not so much. But like on my phone, I can be super practical. Yeah, exactly. I'm very, very organized with such things. So if you notice the green, you'll see that this is the holiday of Pesach, which, by the way, Google Calendars, the app has a Hebrew calendar option, and all the Hebrew holidays get pulled in. So this is the holiday of Passover. Now, if you look at the pink, you'll see that those are my 2 cooking days. So I worked backwards. I'm going to need 2 days to cook, which means that my kitchen has to become kosher for Passover the day before that. So here you'll notice it says turning over kitchen. The day before that, my kitchen needs a deep clean. Also, that's the day my housekeeper's coming. So deep clean the day before that. Then I work backwards. I know that I'm going to be having a Shabbat dinner, and even though I'm going to do my best to make sure that I don't have crumbs around my house, it might happen. So my chairs and my table and my living room area, I'm going to do after Shabbat. This week, we're very lucky. We have a full week from the Shabbat before Passover until the Seder. Then this Shabbat is purple. Oh, we will be having a birthday celebration to be determined. That's my birthday. Just because you're looking at my calendar. Then master bedrooms, laundry room, kids rooms, guest rooms, bathrooms, the books in the house, everything's on a schedule. Now, let me tell you what happened after I made my calendar. I looked at my calendar and I said, wait, I only have to start in a week and a half. So relaxed, because I know that I don't have to start cleaning now. So my kid's walking around with Cheerios stuck to her toes. Okay, I'm fine. I didn't start cleaning yet. We're okay. She's 1.5. She literally, by the way, Cheerios stuck to her toes happened. But she's a baby. And it's fine because I don't have to worry. Freedom. I'm not a slave to the schedule. The schedule just gave me freedom. That is the most practical way I can tell you that structure gives freedom. Because first of all, I don't have to remember any of this because I wrote it all down. So now my brain can think about other things. I don't have to start thinking, well, what day am I doing this? And what day am I doing that? Ready to create a structure. Many people feel like a calendar, a structure, a schedule, it confines them. But it gives you freedom because you don't have to do all the work in your own brain. Write it down. Release it from your brain. You know that you can rely on it. Also back it up to the cloud in case you lose your phone. But reality is that this is such a basic example of such a deep concept that structure gives us freedom. And when the Jews left Egypt, they went into such a great structure of do's and don'ts, and God says yes and God says no. They received the Torah, and it's like the Torah is freedom? Really? Yes. Structure gives us freedom. And that is something so valuable because we choose the structure. A structure that's enforced upon us is really not free because we haven't made the choice. To be honest, if you were to take my calendar and my schedule and put it into yours, you probably wouldn't feel as free as I do because you have to personalize it and customize it and make it your own. And that's the beauty of the Torah. The Torah is not a burden that we are given and do this and that exactly like this. Torah gives us a framework and a structure, and we can find ourselves in the Torah. If you've been here long enough, you know that that's what we do every week with the Torah portion. We find ourselves in the Torah portion so that we can take lessons and make them practical and meaningful for our own lives. That's freedom, making the structure work for you. Now, we don't, God forbid, change the Torah or enhance the mitzvot in their laws to make it work for us, but we use our own personalities in a way that fits the framework. And we use the framework in a way that fits our lifestyle so that together it can mesh into a personalized life that is working for both us and God. God tells us what works for him. We know, or we hope we know, what works for us. And creating that relationship with God is finding a way that it can work for both of us. What's special is that God is also inside us, so it's very easy to find a way to make it work because God is within us. That's what gives us the ability to be free. That's what gives us the ability to have choices. And ultimately, that's what gives us the ability to clean ourselves for Pesach. So treat yourself. Treat yourself to a spiritual cleansing experience. While you're cleaning your home, clean your heart, make yourself free. And if you can't get there right away, just remember, you have plenty of time. And even if you don't get there on Passover, you don't feel like you're completely free, just the fact that you've identified what you are a slave to, what your Pharaoh is, that already means you're on the path to freedom. So l'chaim to being on the path to freedom, getting there, and hopefully not becoming a slave again by next Passover. Otherwise, what are we going to do next Passover? That's why we need Mashiach, so we can experience real freedom, real redemption, and we should celebrate Passover this year with the Pesach offering in the third temple. May it be today. Amen. Now, if anybody has any questions,